So the Fool's Journey goes through the 22 cards. We will be speaking in further podcasts about the Minor Arcana. Nina has briefly touched on it in terms of what they represent, the elements, and we'll be going much more into depth with that. But this is again just an introduction into the Major Arcana, because we're also going to be doing a future podcast on the Major Arcana as well, where we'll go into much more depth about each card and shedding a bit more light onto each card in terms of what it means and things of that nature. But that is just a very basic, brief introduction in terms of what the Major Arcana is about. It's the Fool, the Fool's Journey, and the last card, which is the World card, which represents completion. So we've got from the beginning to the ending. Again, and just like we spoke earlier on about the seasons, it's cyclical, something beginning, and as Nina pointed out, with every death, there's a renewal, there's a rebirth, there's a continuum. That is what the nature of the Major Arcana essentially is about. And when somebody comes for a reading, like I said, and a card gets pulled out from the Major Arcana, whichever card comes out is going to be telling us what stage of development the person is at that particular time, in context with the question that they are asking.
I think what's really interesting, and I don't know about you, but I have loads and loads of tarot decks.
Yeah, I collect them.
Yeah, me too. I've got this huge
I
drawer full of them.
I collect tarot decks, so
that sometimes I just use the Major Arcana.
Yeah.
And I find it very useful because the Major Arcana gets right to the deep point of things, because they are psycho-spiritual cards. They're relating to the higher realms of who you are and how you formulate information within you. Yeah. And sometimes the depth of something comes out in them in a way that wouldn't be. But this is my favorite deck that I use most often in my public readings, both when I work at Psychic Sisters and Suffrages in London or for private readings, because they're a nice size for my hand, they're small, and when I do parties or other things, very often you get small tables, so you can't have, when you have the bigger cards, it's much harder to manipulate them. I also have teeny tiny decks which I find too small. So the size of the cards is one thing because of the space you're using. Also, they're easier for me to shuffle because my hands are small. So that's a kind of just a physical problem thing. The other thing is the imagery has to resonate with me. The Hanson Roberts are really lovely cards because they're the right size and they have beautiful images of bright colors. They're not threatening to people. So for this is the Major Arcana, the Lovers, the Sun, and it's got all of the different hallmarks of the Rider-Waite, but with a bit brightness connected to them. And even the Tower and the Death card, somehow they don't quite look so heavy, you know. So, and I think that's quite important, is you don't want to frighten people off. If I were going to a pagan fest, I'd bring along my Druid cards because I love them. They're beautiful. I particularly love them. They're one of my favorites. Wonderful images, beautiful artwork, and they're a bit big, but that's okay. You know, so that they really speak to a certain part of me. I also really like the Starseed Tarot, which is quite a different modern approach to things. Again, very big cards, but if I'm giving demonstrations and things and want to show something that's a bit different, a modern interpretation. So Indigo is the Fool, and you can see the same type of image here, the young, untutored person, but energetically surrounded by all potential. And this is their suits are slightly different, but the meanings are... They're saying the same thing. They're pointing into the same direction. I try and pick, and I've got many decks. The Thoth deck is very good for esoteric readings. I have many different decks, and all of them will kind of sing to me. And very often when I give a reading, I have several decks for people to select. I say, what attracts you? And then that person feels involved, which is really important.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's the first step in kind of extracting information. Oh, I immediately know, well, if they choose that deck, I have a feeling already about who they are, what they like, what kind of thing they're attracted to.
Yeah.
I may not know why at that point, but it's the beginning of me getting a certain kind of information.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. I think definitely developing that relationship with the client is very, very, very important. And very often, not all the time, but very often I do have, again, a selection of cards, and I'll tell them to pick. Because I think that's also important, that the client is attracted towards a particular kind of tarot or particular deck because of the color, because of the size, that kind of thing. I mean, you was talking about that. I mean, this is the Druid Tarot is one of my favorites, and they are particularly quite big. Very often, even when I've given them to clients to shuffle, they've said, "Oh, these are big cards," But I mean, I've got used to it over the time because I use them all the time. But like the Starseed cards are they're even bigger than those ones, so they're quite big. But yes, I mean, I do that with clients. I allow them to pick whichever deck that they're attracted to. Yeah, I'm willing to, and I like using different decks. Different images spark off different parts of my imagination and my ability to connect and to grasp things. And again, there's no chance, there's no coincidences why the particular client picked that particular deck. So within the imagery also as well, there's going to be something that I'm going to connect to, that's going to pop out for me, that's going to allow me to add to the interpretation, to the reading of why the client is there.
Yeah. So there's so many interesting elements connected to doing tarot. It's a very it's not complicated, but it's complex, many-layered system of different that incorporates things that resonate so deeply to nature, to our psyche, to being, to connectedness, and how you manipulate the cards. So every single card, individual card, has a meaning, but how they interact with each other. Yeah. What ends up next to each other or surrounding those cards. Yeah. The gypsies called all card readings storytelling. And it is a kind of storytelling. You're telling a story that is based on that person's story. Their story. And very often we get caught up in our stories, and the reason people come for readings is they want to kind of discover alternative stories. And the cards can give you that. So I think the purpose of having readings is very broad-based too. It can be for self-knowledge. It can be, and even if I give a reading to somebody, I'm learning something myself about myself too, because you attract certain clients for you to listen to something yourself. Either you know it or you don't know it for yourself, or need to remind yourself.
And that's why I feel that the Mythic Tarot is very, very important. Again, one of my favorite decks, because the Mythic Tarot, again, it's rooted in myth, in Greek mythology, and we all know that mythology is pretty much about storytelling, but it's not just storytelling for the fun of storytelling. It's storytelling that is essentially reflecting the story of your own life within inside you, or within inside the client that has come for the reading as well. So Mythic Tarot is very good because it allows you to be able to, I also find that with the Mythic Tarot, once you understand the myth, it allows you to be able to, when each card comes out, it allows you to be able to have a wider scope, because you have an understanding of that whole myth, of that story, and how that card pertains to the mythology and to the story of the individual who's having the reading.
Well, mythology relates to archetypes.
Yes.
And archetypes are relevant to everybody.
Yes.
To all humanity, to the human existence. And so having an understanding of those is a key.
Yeah, definitely.
Very interesting. So I think that we've covered kind of the basics of why to have a reading, what a reading is about, what the cards are, what the structure is, and what makes tarot such an exciting and worthwhile thing to begin to study, because it teaches you about yourself, it teaches you about the pathway of your life, and it also helps you to help others potentially too. So we hope you've enjoyed our intro to the Circle of Divine Tarot series, and please do look up all the other recordings in this series, because they will give you a very, fun and interesting foundation in this very exciting kind of pathway. So from me, Nina Ashby, I wish you a big goodbye, and
from me, Ajose, I'll be seeing you soon.